Hi everyone, and welcome to Writing Time today. So today I'm going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning of this video just talking through this community map and how I use it with writing with my students, and that might offer some considerations for you as you're thinking maybe one, why did I just do this community map? Was it just fun? And the answer is yes, it was just fun. But it also really sets up some writing in my classroom, and I wanted to share that, and it might help you see, oh, this is how it could be potentially used for my writing as well. And also because I wanted to give a little bit of background regarding the labeling of the memories and just talking about that a little bit more too, and what happens if I run into some students who struggle with recalling things. And so I'm going to put down in the description the timestamp at which I go into the writing practice for today. So if you don't care about all that background, you can just go ahead and skip to that. So last time we looked at our community maps, and this is again mine of South Omaha. I just kind of folded up so I can keep it where I need to keep it in a little bin of slight organization. And so I asked you to label different things, and I said you could do that in a couple of different ways. So maybe you got to the end of that video and just thought okay, I'll put down 3 labels, and maybe that's good. So I'm going to review that first. So remember, those labels can be important locations, or they could be locations in the map where you have different memories. So you could either label this is what the store is. They could be the names of those locations, or they could include people who occupy those different spaces. And so for one, I didn't include my piano teacher's name because I honestly don't remember it, but I remember whereabouts that she lived, and there are memories within her house that I found formative. There are memories going to her house that I found really interesting as well. She and her family represented, I think, something that really, the older I got, the more I realized how it spoke to the culture of our community, because her parents were Lithuanian immigrants. And so I had access to their history, whereas Lithuania is a country that not too many people learn about in depth in school, what happened in the 30s and 40s, etc. there. So her parents came from Lithuania. She ended up living right next to them. So anyway, there's a lot kind of involved there, but I just have this simple label, and I'll just show it to you here: piano teacher's house. And so with that there, this is my little opening to the house, and it's a little piano. With that there, I have access to all those memories of the things that happened in her house, the histories behind her family, and it's something that I could consider digging into more, but I have that on my map. The other layers that I offered you to write, besides just labeling those significant moments and memories and things, I offered in the activity to consider areas in your communities that gave you strength or support, or that you saw as positive. And so you could go back and, for example, if you drew your school, if you drew your backyard, if you drew the place where you currently live or a place where you formerly lived, what were spaces within that place that you found positive or strengthening? And I also suggested you go back after that and label areas that would represent challenge or struggle for you, maybe where you encountered conflict, either external or internal. Sometimes there are spaces that continually raise up internal conflicts within ourselves. And so those places, those labels can offer a lot of fodder for writing. So I think you can see after doing this activity how it can really foster potentials for student writing. It can really help them with that statement that a lot of them bring to our classes, which is, I don't have anything to write about. Okay, so maybe they haven't experienced the opportunity to have choice in writing, and I found this exercise really guided them towards considering how rich their lives are, or even many of them didn't really want to put that label. They're like, well, I don't know if this story matters, but I guess I'll write about it because my teacher's making me. And through the continual practice of that invitation to write about their lives, this community map brought in a revelation of oh, there is something that happened in my life that I feel the need to write about. And I find that writing really powerful for our students because it's the type of writing that writers do. So I really appreciate it for that. And just to let you know, we spend a lot of class time on the creation of this map, and by a lot, I mean like 45 minutes. I don't just say, hey, do this in 5 minutes and see what you get. So I introduce the idea, I have them do some drafting, I show mine to them as a potential. I like them to do a little bit of drafting first. I say, no, you can't go on Google Maps and look at your house. This has to come from your memory so we can really stoke that part of the brain that's going to be bringing up those stories. And so after 45 minutes of me introducing, giving them time, kind of redirecting them, asking them to label, then coming back, and I always have them share with their peers, because in that sharing, more ideas are brought up and they hear from their peers of memories and places of significance. And so it's like, oh, maybe I have a space like that too in my map. And so a lot of my students end up wanting to finish at home, or sometimes if they're really going after it, I let it bleed into the next day. And so in this exercise, we are figuratively and literally remembering our communities, our places of importance to us, our places of growth. And the doing and the drawing can really help us access and rebuild these memories. And so that's why I invited you into this experience as well, because some of you maybe came into this moment of writing thinking like, oh, there's a story that's begging to be written, and other people might be thinking, oh, well, I'll just see what happens. And so hopefully as we begin, there's a lot of these activities that give you places, or are the fertilizer, so to speak, to reveal the rich ground in which you stand and the stories that can come from that rich ground. And so as a note, as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of this video, some students really struggle to access memories for whatever reason. It's trauma. Trauma usually blocks parts of the brain. So I'll have students who say, I can't remember that part of my life. Like, I don't have very many memories from childhood. I can think of one. And sometimes they go through this exercise and more comes up because, again, they're accessing that part of the brain that's reconstructing things. But other times I just say, okay, then let's just kind of set that part of the exercise aside. Some students get really rigid and saying, my teacher gave me this part of the assignment. It has to be about the past. And I'll say, nope, just pick a space now where you spend a lot of your time. So that could be at school, it could be in certain classrooms, and that's where students really start revealing their current selves too. Maybe it's a stage and they have lots of memories of doing choir or drama. Maybe it's a field or church. Maybe it's another house within their community. Maybe it's a store where they spend a lot of time. Maybe it's where they work. And so by allowing them to, again, get flexible and say, no, your present lives are worth doing too. Let's draw out those spaces. Sometimes students can then feel the invitation of like, okay, I can start bringing in what's going on with me now and unpacking that. And I always tell students, you get to decide how deep you want to go. Some of you have stories that you really want to tell. Others of you might think like, no, I'm just going to keep this lighthearted. And both are great because both are what you need to bring to the table, literally, right now as they're working on their little table desks. So last thing, as far as background, I use this community map as part of a multi-genre project for my students, where I each day go through different genres. So it's in really quick succession, and they can see, okay, this genre looks like this, and it's different from that genre in this way. And this is maybe how I can write this story. And so I show them lots of genres, and we practice writing in different genres so that they are given the choice, not just what stories to tell, but how to tell them. And because this can be really overwhelming for students, if I were just to step up and say, hey, write a story however you want to write it. It can be any genre you want to write it. A lot of them would get analysis paralysis, and again, say like, I don't know how to write this, or like what kind of poem do you want me to write, teacher? And I say, you can write whatever. That can be overwhelming. So I guide students through, here are different ways to practice these genres. And so that's the second part that I'm going to be doing today, right now, is looking at what does it look like to potentially step into a genre. So if you need to pause the video and go back and label more, awesome. You can go ahead and do that, and then we'll get into our writing for today. So today I would like you to pull out your map and take a look at what you've created. And I want you to think of a memory or a place that stands out in your mind that you think you can describe really well, or a memory that brings up one of the five senses. So maybe you look at a place in your map and you think, oh, there is a smell in this place. Or there was always this sound outside of my house. Maybe it's something your neighbors were doing. Or there was like this place had a feel on my skin, whether, again, if we're thinking of the classroom, how muggy it can get in our classroom sometimes, especially if you teach 8th block study hall after 7th graders have PE and your air conditioning did not work that summer. That's a real thing. So go ahead and pause the video and write down the descriptions. You can even just list words and list what comes up in the five senses as you think of that moment. So we're really trying to see how can I describe this moment? What does this moment bring out in the five senses? So go ahead and pause the video, spend a few minutes just jotting down what comes to mind, and then we'll come back. So now, whatever you have written down, maybe you just listed things out, maybe you started writing a couple paragraphs, I want you to think about what would it look like for you to, in your writing, invite somebody to experience that moment with you. And what I mean by that is, how can you establish in your writing description that will help your reader step into that moment with you? So if I wanted to invite a reader into my classroom, into that moment that was so hot, I first need to get them to feel the heat with me. And maybe you've already started doing that and can kind of go back and see, as a reader, what would I think about this? But what I ask my students to do at this time, a lot of them have just listed things out or just started going. I ask them to go back and rewrite that same image, trying to make it come alive again, which again, for some students can be really threatening. They're like, I don't know, I just list things. And so I say, yeah, you can just say, it was hot, it was this, it was that, but try to really think about that moment and look around you in your mind's eye with what's going on. The other thing I invite them to do, and if you've already done some writing today and you have this opportunity to do this, go back into that space and sit there for a little bit and see what you notice in the present that will help aid your construction of that memory in the past. So some of us as writers are practiced at doing that. Our students often don't have that strategy, and they don't realize how being present in the moment can help their writing, even if they're writing about the past. So I encourage you to go back and continue writing, or just to even rewrite the couple paragraphs or lines that you did, considering what does it look like to build this so that when my reader reads it, they are with me in this place, in this space. So that's our writing for today. Let's see where it takes you, and we'll see you again later.